Okay, so so we have to understand that there's something happening that maybe is not clear and apparent to us until we begin to really investigate. And I was just about to get to the point about this collective karma that happens, like with the things that happen with the kids up in what was it, Connecticut, when those kids died, and the same thing happens in automobile accidents. The same thing happened in aircraft when aircraft goes down. When these catastrophic things happen and many people die, who all seem to be innocent. But the thing is, we don't understand the iceberg below the surface. We don't know who those beings were. We don't know what they did in past lives and so on. And we can't make judgments based on not knowing. We have to have a degree of equanimity about this and know that there is this energy that is in play here. And we are fortunate. We have these good lives and so on, but there's karma yet that may come up that we're not prepared for, that we didn't anticipate. Look, however old we are and we're good, how are we going to die? Are we going to die in one of those airplanes going down? Are we going to die from a bomb going off? Are we going to die from a disease? Are we going to die from a gunshot? There's so many different ways. Are we going to die in bed? Are we going to die in a hospital? Are we going to die in the street? We don't know. But we need to be prepared and be able to see that this life is a temporary life. And when it comes down to it, the metaphor is we're just going to take off this body, we're going to drop this body, and we're going to go into another body. Unless we can liberate from it and become a Buddha. For us, to be realistic, we might have a ways to go for that. But nevertheless, we're on the path to that, and we can become yogi, we can become bodhisattva, we can put ourselves on the way, which all means that we are applying the teachings, we're applying the Dharma, and we become as much an observer as anything else. And if we get too much caught up in all this, we can cause our own demise of spirituality. We can suppress our spirituality. So we always need to keep an open mind, which means an open heart, our big mind. So we look at the samsara as a stage. And we're all acting out these parts. We all have these roles that we're playing, and we gave these to ourselves. We are the architect of our lives, and then we become the engineers of our lives. So we need to navigate through that. So, like I said in the beginning, I wasn't going to be able to give a very eloquent description of this that was very comprehensive, but I think the main point here is to see this as an invisible energy that maybe we don't recognize and understand completely, but we need to be able to give it more effort, more time, and accept the guidance from those who are teaching about this and allow ourselves to experience it for ourselves. That's what makes the difference. So what do you think about that? Gary, what do you think about, the poor kids who had to die at the hands of some crazy person? What do you think about that?
Well, I understand on a certain level what you're saying, and I accept it. Had I been there, I probably would have tried to intervene. But I can, within the context of the Buddhist community and what I'm trying to become, I can accept it and I can work with that. But, and we don't really proselyte you know,
I don't know what that means. That's a word I don't understand.
convert,
Oh, okay.
you know, and go out door to door like some people do. But I found that it's not something that can easily be discussed with people who have not experienced the Buddhist context. I could not tell, for instance, someone with numbers on their arm who saw many of their brothers and sisters slaughtered mercilessly, that it was their karma, and expect to receive an open mind. And so I decided that there's not a great deal I can say about it to someone outside of this Sangha or our extended Sanghas.
Well, that's true.
It just, and someone wiser in the practice than me and longer standing might be able to find a way to do that. But I've searched inside myself for how can I explain the hideous death of people who are otherwise seemingly innocent, whether they be children or adults, and say it was something which amounts to it was bound to happen. It's not going to be well received.
So for you, as an individual, someone who is, proclaiming that you are a Buddhist and so on, does this help to clarify it to some degree for you?
It does.
Okay.
It does, but I am someone who likes to answer the question why when some people ask me.
Well, don't mix it up. Don't mix it up. Stay within yourself. When we start going outside and we start trying to do too much, that's when we create doubt for ourselves and we kind of pull the rug from underneath our feet. And if we have a propensity to do that, and most of us do, we want to share what I've learned, but sometimes it's not the right time. Sometimes it's not the right person that we're talking to. Sometimes we don't have the right wisdom or skillful means to be able to explain it. So we kind of dig ourselves into a hole and we create more negativity for ourselves, as well as the negativity that we might be creating in somebody else's mind who doesn't understand it. Because now they're thinking bad about you and they're thinking about, oh, this crazy Buddhism, it believes crazy things and so on. So it taints everything. So we have to know when to stop. And that's a very important lesson right there. Yes, somebody was going to say something.
Yeah, I just like to add one quick thing here as I was listening to all of your comments. Very helpful, laid the background, helping us to expand our understanding of this. But the term words, the word or the concept karma is particularly used in Buddhism and Hinduism. But there are other alternative words for karma. I think even in Christianity, is it not so? Because there are sayings like what goes round comes round. I think that's also
retribution. Retribution might be
retribution,
a word.
right? Yeah. So karma, that's more or less is karma. And then we will also have in other traditions, they used to say, don't do unto others what you don't want to do unto you. So that's also more or less like karma, meaning, except the word karma is used in Buddhism and Hinduism, but there are other alternative terms for karma. So I think even other traditions, Christians and so on, they also believe in something. And then also I would like to bring the word fatalism or fate. Isn't that same as karma?
No.
No. Okay. So
I mean, not in its true expression.
Yeah.
Not in its true expression. In a superstitious expression,
I see.
That's where that would come to be, fate and so on. If a black cat crosses your path, you're fated for a bad omen, for something bad to happen. But if you're not a superstitious person, it doesn't matter. It could have been a white cat. It doesn't matter.
So looks like in Tibetan, we have only one word for both fate and karma. We call it lewang, le junde, or cause and effect. And so in that sense, but yeah, you make a good distinction between the two here. So basically what I want to say here is karma is a very powerful concept according to Tibetan Buddhist understanding. It helps us to cope with the difficult situations. For example, if there's a big death, if there's a tragedy in the family, we say, okay, there's a reason for why things happens or why it happens. Like in Christianity, they say there's always a reason for why things happens. So we believe in such a way, then it helps us to cope with the situations. It kind of mitigate our sufferings and so on. But at the same time, Buddhist teachers, they also say we can't leave everything to karma. We can't leave, without making an effort to fate, thinking like, okay, whatever happens is going to happen because we can't do anything. It is going to be our fate or karma. So I sometimes I don't understand if are we going to be able to divert the karma? Are we going to have some control over the karma or the fate that we are going to face, or it is something that we cannot control? Whatever is going to happen is going to happen. Right. And this. Thank you.
That's a good point. And Michael's got his hand up. So please, Michael, speak, and then we'll talk to what Dorji was just asking about.
Yes, I think when we think in terms of a precious human life, we're not thinking in terms of the average human life. The precious human life is a sort of a Buddhist construct that identifies the lived experience, which is very, very rare. On the other hand, we like to say that every life is precious, and that's not something that I would ever argue against. However, life is death. Life is just the other side of death, and we tend to think that death is tragedy. Things happen to people, and they lose their life. Losing life is probably the wrong way to put it. Death is part of life, and when it comes down to it, our human life is so short. It's like a tiny tea candle. It's worth about a half an hour of burn, and then it's gone. And what's left of us, that energy that is our true nature, it doesn't survive in the sense that we like it to survive. But I think our true nature it transcends this physical realm. So it's easy to say when somebody goes to war and somebody's kid gets killed that it's such a tragedy. Well, it's not a tragedy that people die, because we do it all the time, and we're all going to do it. So thinking in terms of what did we do to have to die it's sort of inflating on purpose. It's inflating the value of our single life, and imagining that this little life on this earth is owed to us, and that something must have gone wrong if we're going to die. And that's on the contrary, it's quite normal that we all die. And from our perspective, it's always going to be a tragedy, and it's very rarely painless or free from suffering. So I think it's a matter of taking that sort of bird's eye view on things, and looking at what we call tragic death as something that's a sort of a normal occurrence.
Very good, thank you. So if I can address what Dorji just brought up, and actually invoked some of the things that Michael just said and some of the things that other people have said, is if I can paraphrase what Dorji said, what about arising karma? Karma that's coming up. You know, I use the example, we may have a good life, but we're going to die of something. And how we die is part of our karma. We are karmic beings. We are here because of our karma, good karma, bad karma, neutral karma, so on. You know, there's all kinds of things that maybe we don't recognize right away, but we're here because of that. And we call that, you know, in many of the prayers, many of the practices, you'll hear it referred to as migrators. There were migrators going through these lifetimes of all these changes, all these vicissitudes, all these things, all these causes and conditions that are happening to us. And then we're reacting to them and creating new causes and conditions. Sometimes we are continuing the same old causes and conditions because we haven't learned our lessons, but sometimes we are able to find those causes and conditions and able to kind of neutralize the result by applying the proper antidote to what might be that karma coming up, so that we are again gaining bodhicitta, loving kindness, which can be expressed as wisdom, and compassion, which can be expressed as method or skillful means how to apply that wisdom. And then joy, meaning that we understand all this dynamic, but we celebrate that we have this life. We realize that we have a control and we have to take control, and that we are enjoying that control. And then there's the equanimity to recognize that we shouldn't get too caught up in the dualities. We should bring it together and say it's all the same. It's all the same. It's all equal at some level, and it's a dynamic thing that changes from time to time. So this arising karma, we have to allow to come to fruition. If we suppress it, then it's just going to sit there until it comes up another time when those conditions are ripe. So what's a situation for that? Let me see. If we're afraid of heights, we don't like to go up on ladders. We don't like to go on the second floor of a building. You know, we definitely don't like to go up on a rooftop and look down, something like that, you know. And, you know, why don't we like that? Well, there's myriad reasons why we are afraid of that, why we don't like that, you know. So do we suppress that and say, okay, I'm never going to go up on a ladder. I'm never going to step up on a chair to reach a light bulb or something like that. I'm never going to go on the second floor of a house, or I'm never going to go up to a rooftop and look down. You know, is that not suppressing that neurotic sense that we have? Or do we say, you know what, I got to look this square in the face. I got to really overcome this. It's an irrational fear. I've got to make myself learn that I can have a ladder that is perfectly stable. There's somebody there to support me, to hold the ladder in place, and in case I fall, to be able to take care of me, you know. And I should go up the ladder a few steps, or I should go up on the second floor of a building and go with somebody who's going to help me, or I should go up onto a rooftop and I should look down and I should face it. And once I face it, I overcome it. And that's like allowing the fruition of that karma, that fear, to dissipate, to become neutralized, and so on. So we need to allow things to come to fruition. You know, there's a prayer called the courage and wisdom prayer. You know, if I'm going to be sick, let me be sick. If I'm going to die, let me die. If I'm going to be healthy, let me be healthy. You know, whatever the circumstance is, I'm going to do it. I'm going to accept it. And I'm going to use it in terms of my spirituality. I'm not going to let it suppress my spirituality. I've got to use my spirituality to be able to look at my physical body and my intellectual mind and be able to put it in terms of spirituality. If I don't do that, I just become a robot of some kind or another. Because we are spiritual beings, you know? So you may not recognize that right now. Maybe you do. But that's part of what we're coming to grips with, is realizing that we have a physical body, intellectual body, and spiritual body. And we're learning more and more and more about our spiritual body. And it takes many lifetimes. We don't do it all in one time. So it's taken us many lifetimes to get here. We have many lifetimes to go. So to answer Dorji's question again is, we allow things to come up. We allow things to manifest and we deal with it. Okay. A case in point, somebody who gets a diagnosis of a terminal disease, and that disease is not going to be pleasant. How many people do you know or have you heard about who go and kill themselves over it? How many people through mental illness, who not being able to process their confusion, take their own lives? Why? Because they wouldn't allow themselves the privilege or the ability or the responsibility to be able to deal with that bad karma. It builds character, if nothing else. You know, and killing ourselves is the same as killing somebody else, maybe worse, because, you know, we've killed our opportunity to be able to grow. And that's what we've done to somebody else. But when we've done it to ourselves is just as heinous as it is taking somebody else's life. So we need to face adversity and work through adversity. It's easy for me to say right now, and hopefully I won't be faced with some kind of a decision like that anytime soon. But invariably, we probably will. I probably will. You know, my death is going to come. You know, so it's something that we have to prepare for. So I hope that explains something, at least leads us in a direction to be able to look at it some more. Maybe we need to read some books. Maybe we have some books. We need to look in the index and say, what does the index say about these things? And get more information so that we can practice more. We're practicing our transcendence, practicing getting beyond our limited human nature, and look at this from the point of view of an enlightened being. That's what we need to do. That's what practice is about, to change our point of view. Anybody got a comment or question about that?
Lance, this is like, I'm digesting all this. So I'm going to digest all this in waves, because there's a lot of, again, gemstones you've just given out. Everyone's been giving out gemstones. So to summarize or clarify, I guess, maybe to clarify, when we're presented with something, let's say that, like you said, like illness or something non-optimal, that it feels like suffering, that is the opportunity to recognize, to take actions towards that versus escaping it. Like lean towards it, accept it, experience it.
Yes.
Okay.
And neutralize it, transform it into goodness.
So this is,
yes.
This is actually really, this little nugget here you're just sharing is very interesting to me. And I'm going to think about it a little bit intellectually, like as like what you just said as a sentence, and think about it in practice. Like, for example, like if I'm having an issue with tax payments, right? Like it seems like I'm in like, are you struggling with money or whatever, or something like that. I want to think about that very fundamentally, but then think about those actions, because then there's the pragmatic issue of dealing with it, right? Dealing with whatever it is, like having to go through like cancer treatments or coming up with financing options, but then there's something else there in that for you. I'm summarizing and trying to clarify out loud all at once to listeners. And Dorji's trying to help me. Maybe Dorji will help me. I don't know. I like what you just said. And I think there's so much wisdom in that for me, what you just said. So I want to think about, because there's something I need to take away, because that just really hit my brain. Thank you.
I hope you took notes. You know, I take notes. You guys are talking, I'm taking notes.
I type stuff in my keypad.
You guys amaze me. People amaze me that have this capacity to remember all this stuff. I don't have that capacity.
I have a document. I have a virtual document, Lance, that I type. It's like I literally
not that good. Okay. Dorji, you wanted to say something?
Oh, no, I was just agree what everything you all have shared. So I'm processing, and it's a really good discussion. So I'm getting insights from everything that every one of you shared. So it's more of a collective kind of wisdoms and experiences. So that's really helpful, because sometimes when I say something, it's all from my own angle and perspective. But when someone else says something, then it's really add to my knowledge. So thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, so I'm not finished with this part about samsara. You know, there's another part here on this paper. You know, so we have to understand now, what is suffering? So in this center part here, if you look down in the italics, it says human suffering. So human suffering can be broken down into three groups. One is all-pervading suffering. The other is suffering of suffering, or suffering, the suffering of change, excuse me, the suffering of change, and then the suffering of suffering. So three groups, I'll say it again. The all-pervading suffering, the suffering of change, and the suffering of suffering. So I'm going to begin with the suffering of suffering. What is suffering of suffering? That means the suffering of everyday things that are happening in our lives, the vicissitudes of the changes that we go through in life, the dramas that we go through, regardless of who's created them, whether we created them for ourselves or we're reacting to what somebody else did, and then we're dealing with that. And so our emotions and so on, we have to go through that. So it's explained in this way. It's explained the suffering of suffering, that all sentient beings have this suffering of birth, sickness, old age, and death. And you've heard these in the prayers over and over again. We talk about it every day, or we recite this every day. Birth, death, old age, and sickness. Right, is that what I said? So, so all beings, all sentient beings are born in some way. And we talk about that we're born in the womb. We talk about we're born from an egg. We're born from heat and moisture, like reptiles, or not reptiles, but insects, and miraculous birth. You know, so we all come from this birth. And then as we are growing, we become susceptible to illnesses, to sickness or injury. We become susceptible to that. Different inputs that are coming into our lives that make us feel comfortable or uncomfortable. So sickness, injury, and then old age. I didn't say old age before. I'll thought to that. Fourth one is old age. Old age, that we grow old, no matter who we are, whether we're an insect or we're a human being or whatever, we grow old and things change there. We're changing, the hair gets white, you can't see as good, you got to get your glasses, you might have hearing aids or something like that. You may walk with a cane. All these different things begin to happen because of old age. You get injured, you don't heal as fast, you start getting more susceptible to certain kinds of diseases and so on like that. Dorje, you got your hand up. Did you want to say something?
I have one quick question here. So regarding the suffering of sufferings and the suffering of birth, does it refers to, mother giving birth to a child? So in that case, it is the mother who is giving the birth, and the one who is suffering is the mother. Does that mean men are exempted from suffering or what?
No, not at all. The woman, the mother, is certainly suffering from the pain and so on like that. But what about the baby? What about the infant? How much suffering does that infant go through for many, 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 many years? Because that infant is suffering because it can't feed itself. It can't clothe itself. It can't clean itself. It can't do anything for itself for quite a long period of time. So it's suffering. And it's trying to find a way to communicate, and it communicates through its crying. That's its device to be able to draw attention to itself for the parents or for the caretakers to come and take care of it. So that child is suffering right from being born. So from that perspective, you can see that we all go through that because we are completely helpless when we are born. And that's suffering. Yeah, somebody had their hand up. Yes, Louisa.
I've always understood it also that when a baby is in the mother's womb, she or he doesn't realize that there's going to be change. Their world as they know it in the womb is going to change. They're very comfortable in there. And in a way, this big change, it's like dying in the old world that they've known, in this world, the only world they've known in the womb. They're actually leaving that, they're changing, they're dying to that world, and they're being born into another world. And that's a big change for them. So there's a lot of change in there for that baby. And it's leaving a very comfortable place that they've known, to die in that place, but be born into their life.
That's a good example. Thank you. Yes. So we suffer when we're born. We suffer when we get sick. We suffer when we get old. And then the suffering of death. Now, the suffering of death may not be just the pain of what's causing us to die. Maybe there's no pain at all with our death from a physiological point of view. But from an intellectual point of view, there may be a great fear. No matter who we are, there's that unknown. You may be a very spiritual being, but still there's this little nagging thing in the back of your head that sometimes, becomes like a bone in your heart that says, I'm not so sure about this death thing. I don't know what it really is. I'm afraid of it. I'm not ready to let go. I'm afraid, So this fear factor becomes something that maybe, we all can share, we all can commiserate with, that there is this fear of of that change, of that, is it going to be something that is going to be painful? Is it going to be something that I'm going to be all alone and I don't want to be all alone? Or is it going to be something that I'm going to be surrounded by people and I'm going to have all kinds of tubes stuck in me and meters are going beep, 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 and all these things. I'm dying in a hospital and maybe I don't want to die in a hospital. So how much control do we have over this? Maybe we fear having no control. We're a spiritual person and we know something about the transference of consciousness, the POA, we call it, the POA. And am I going to be able to be aware enough to be able to perform the POA, to have that transference of consciousness? Because if I don't do it right, I'm likely to be born immediately in some negative fashion that I really don't want to. And I've been working all these years to have a good rebirth, but meanwhile, I blow it because I'm not prepared at the time of death. So these four sufferings are suffering that all sentient beings experience. So all sentient beings. The next level of suffering are human sufferings that are uniquely human. So they're written down here. So the first one says the suffering of separation from loved ones. So that means that, you're in the midst of being somewhere, someplace, and you're not having your friends with you, your family with you, whatever. Maybe you went to a cocktail party by yourself, you had to go for work or something like that, and you got to spend the next 2.5 hours with these people that you really don't like. You ever been in that situation? Maybe it was a dinner, and that 2.5 hours seemed like days, seemed like an eternity. This thing is never going to end. Well, that's the suffering of not being with the ones you loved. If there was someone there, a friend or something, at least you could be sitting on a sofa with them over in a corner somewhere and you could be talking and that would make you feel much better. But when you're all by yourself like that, it's a terrible feeling. If you ever got inducted into the military or something like that, and your first day of going into the service or something like that can be a terrible day. Or maybe it's the first day that you're going to school, or the first day you're going to college, or anything like that, where you're really feeling alone. You're not with anybody. Animals don't feel that. Insects certainly don't feel that. This is a completely human thing to be missing those that you love. And that's a real suffering. The next one is to have to endure those who are not dear with us. So I think I said it wrong. So being at the party is being with those that we have to endure, those that we don't like. Then not being with the ones we love, that is not having our friends and our family around us and so on. So both of those are human things. One is being with the ones that you don't like, and one is not being with the ones that you do like. You're not seeing your family, being imprisoned. You're taking that away, and maybe you get to see someone, for 20 minutes, once a month or something like that. Being imprisoned is a terrible thing, to not be with the ones you love and so on. So that's a better example of that. So not being with the ones you love, being in the midst of those that you don't like. So both of those two. So then the next one is to not finding what we desire. That we have these desires, we want to have these things. Maybe it's a car, maybe it's a house, maybe it's a job, it's a position, whatever, clothing, food, whatever, but not being able to get that, and being, suffering from feeling like that we're inadequate, we we can't get these things for ourselves. We can't get the money for these things, and so on like that. The next suffering is that we get the things that we wanted, but we find out that now we got to protect them. And this is a human thing. Animals don't experience this. Insects don't experience this. You know, we want that car. We took a second job to get the car. We saved up enough money to get the down payment for it and everything. And then we're signing the papers. And the guy says to us, well, do you have your insurance card with you? And you say, oh, no, I don't. Let me call my agent. I call my agent. And he said, oh, you're buying a new car. What kind of car are you buying? He said, oh, that's great. Congratulations. Your premiums are going to double. So you didn't even expect that. Now you got to protect the car, or you buy that car and now you got the insurance and you go out, and you go to the shopping center and you park the car, far away. You park it farthest away that you can so that nobody runs into it or anything like that. But then you come out and you find some joker, took a shopping cart and maybe purposefully or accidentally rams it into the side of the car. And now how miserable you feel because of that. I didn't do enough to protect my car. So these four things: being with those that you don't like, not being with those that you do like, not getting what you desire, what you want, and getting it but having to protect it. These are uniquely human sufferings that we all go through. So understanding this is understanding part of samsara and how we have complicated our lives. Our lives are much more complicated than they were, just, a generation ago, or 2 generations ago, or back in the 1800s. What if we grew up in the 1800s? What would life be like? Would it be simpler? Would it be harder? Would we enjoy the simplicity of it? But then it was more difficult. We wouldn't have had electricity and cell phones and things like that. So we can see that every generation, every civilization has had to deal with these things and so on. The next suffering is the suffering of change. So the suffering of change, a good example of that is what Louisa was saying, that infant that was, before it was born, was experiencing life. However it can experience it, at least it could hear. It can't smell, I don't think, and it maybe has some tactile feelings about it. We know it can hear, but it can't taste, and so it's being born from that womb, and now there's this huge change that comes. So there's many different changes. There's changes in the weather. There's changes in our material things. That car that we got, now all of a sudden, it needs to, we need to wash it. We need to be able to take care of it when it breaks down. We need to take it to the shop. When it breaks down, we got to deal with that change. Our house, the water heater goes out. We got to replace the water heater. All these changes that happen that are very mundane, that we just, we kind of take for granted, but they're sufferings nevertheless. When they happen, you say something, oh my God, how am I going to deal with this? I just got finished paying, a few $1,000s for this repair, and now all of a sudden this is broken down. Now I got to deal with that. Or, I get sick. Now I got to deal with that. I got to go to the doctor, all these different things that can happen that are changes. So we have to deal with the suffering of change. So this is all food for meditation. This is all food for contemplation. This is why we think about this. And then there's the suffering, the all-pervading suffering. The all-pervading suffering is kind of an elevated point of view. Ordinary beings certainly are suffering the suffering of suffering. Ordinary beings are suffering the suffering of change. But beings are not thinking about this table. They're not thinking about this monitor that we're all looking at. We're not thinking about, the house that we happen to be in right now. We're not thinking about that this table came from a tree, and the tree had been the home of many animals and many insects, was food for many insects. And we don't recognize that tree at some point had to be cut down, so those insects and those animals lost their home. And we don't recognize that maybe some human being had to pull that tree out from where it was fallen and then had to be dragged to some kind of a truck or maybe pulled down to the river to have it float down to go to the mill. But in the process of doing that, the guy fell and broke his leg. We don't recognize that. We don't see that. But somebody might have gotten hurt. Somebody was suffering to make that happen. Maybe a guy fell off the tractor or something like that. And then you get it to the mill and they got offloaded in the mill. They got to take the bark off and all the stuff they do. And somebody cut themselves with a saw. We don't see that. And then we get to, they start cutting it up. They cut up the timber. It's got to get stacked and dried and all that kind of stuff. And then somebody comes in and buys all the dried wood and says, okay, I'm going to make tables out of this. And they manage to get it back to their factory where they're going to manufacture these things. They have somebody cutting it up and everything, and they're getting paid, bupkis, hardly anything. And then they have to process it to put it together to make it a table. Dorje, you got your hand up.
Thank you. I think a Western philosopher known as Rousseau, I don't know if it's a British or German someone, he said something, I think, which we can also relate to Buddhist understanding of sufferings. He said, I have a quote by him, something goes like this: human beings are born free, but everywhere they are in chains. So I got it wrong. So do you think this one also kind of corroborates with the Buddhist concept of suffering? The very moment we were born, then we start to suffer. We start to we start to suffer. And in Buddhist concept, it also says, in this samsara world, it is like we are on top of a needle. So there is not a moment of happiness or wellness. So sometimes I kind of little difficult to understand when we say suffering. Is there more than a literal meaning of the suffering, or like or should we say yes, human life is a suffering? But this sounds so pessimistic kind of things. Sorry, I don't know if I get it right what I mean to say. And another thing, yeah, when baby is born, the first thing baby do or does is cry. So maybe that is like the cry of suffering, maybe not a cry of joy. And the very moment when baby is born. Thank you, Michael shared here. So Jennifer or Rousseau, a philosopher. So yes, so it kind of supports this Buddhist concept. And I try to understand the communications of a baby cry the very moment when they were born. So probably it is the cry of suffering. Could that be anything else? Could that mean anything else? Sorry, thank you.
No, I agree. And I think you raise a good point. And let me just finish what I was talking, and we'll circle right back to what you were bringing up. So the suffering of not understanding what it takes to facilitate this this phenomenal nature that we have, all these things and so on, it takes an elevated position to be able to see this. So in other words, an ordinary person would not be thinking about, well, who made this table? And how much suffering went into making this table? Maybe there was an 8-year-old kid who is painting this table in India with leaded paint, and we don't see that. But meanwhile, we go into a store, we see this table, and he says, oh man, this is not a beautiful table. It's imported from India. This is beautiful, but it looked great in my shrine room. It'd be wonderful. But if we investigate a little bit, we find out that some 8-year-old kid painted this thing with lead paint. And that kid may be, a moron by now because of the lead paint poisoning. So an elevated person is taking this into consideration. An elevated person is looking at this. They would say that maybe it's a bodhisattva. The bodhisattva level recognizes the all-pervading suffering of what it is to be in phenomenal nature, all the totality of it, and down to all the little finite parts of it, and so on, and being able to examine all that, to be able to recognize and realize that, and be able to conduct their lives in a way that are minimizing, they're supporting the suffering of others to create all this stuff that we think we need and so on. So I think Dorji's point now, about the baby, about the, I'm sorry, it was, the point about Russo, I forgot, I've forgotten what it was. I was thinking what it was. Anybody help me?
We are born free.
Oh, we're born free, and then we're like, yes, and like we're trapped. As soon as we're born, we're trapped. We're born with the chains, the ball and chain. And yes, that's like the suffering of change.
Yeah.
And the all-pervading suffering. We don't realize it, but then we begin to recognize those things. As we get to be more spiritual, we begin to see more connectedness in life, and we begin to appreciate other people's roles, and we be able to see things more from this higher vantage point instead of just being very myopic and only looking at our own happiness. We begin to experience the suffering or the happiness of other beings and so on. And so, if we are a spiritual person, particularly in the Buddhism, and we say that, in the Bodhisattva, the goal is to be able to help other beings. Through helping other beings, we are perfecting ourselves. We are working on our ego attachments, and we are lessening our suffering by helping other beings to eliminate or to avoid their suffering. So these are the three sufferings of human beings: all-pervading suffering, suffering of change, and the suffering of suffering. So this is encapsulated in a very short time. This requires meditation. That's why these 4 thoughts that turn the mind to the Dharma are so important. And we may sit down, with just a maybe what seems to be a clear mind, but we're going to sit down and we're going to do a practice, and we go through these prayers, and any one of these prayers can spark this intense contemplation and maybe a meditation where we are able to rise above, liberate, and be able to see this from the vantage point of a bodhisattva or from a Buddha's point of view. So these are techniques to help us to do that. This is building mindfulness. So I'm going to stop talking now. Louisa?
Going back to that baby, it's like the change starts there. The change starts when you're born. The suffering comes when you're born, but also when you're dying, it's a big change, and you may or may not be suffering, and you're being transported into maybe a new life, another life, or bodhicitta, and you're going in a new direction. But it's all about change and suffering when you come here and when you go out.
Well, does that mean there's not happiness? Is it all suffering?
No, that doesn't mean there's not happiness. I think there's happiness, and happiness is something you create yourself too. Just like you create.
So you create the
negative-
suffering and you create the happiness?
I think you just normally, well, yeah, in this lifetime, yes. But when you're coming in from a baby, and you're coming in and you see the change, you're changing from one world to another, and you're going right into suffering, but you may or may not create the suffering. It depends on what your choices are, whether you want to create happiness or you want to create suffering.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody else have a comment? Ed?
No, not right now. I don't.
Well,
Thank you.
you turned your microphone on. I thought you were gonna.
Well, I turned it off because somebody came in the room, but I turned it back on.
All right. Anybody else have a comment? Tom?
There was a movie that Lance showed us about a few months back on Saturday night. And it was about a llama that was going into the home of a person that was dying. And it was helping that person recognize and trying to help them through the bardo or into the bardo. And he was accompanied by a younger monk, very young monk. And as they were leaving the house, the younger monk asked the older monk, it's not necessarily a good thing to be reborn, is it? And the old monk said, no, not really. Because when we are born, yes, we come out crying. And maybe because we have a slight remembrance of what we did in our past. And when we're coming out, people enjoy, they're very happy for the parents, for everyone around. But the baby might be saying, what did I do to be reborn again? Why am I back here again? Going through this again. And then when it's time to die or pass from this life, people are around us constantly crying, weeping, sad. But the person that's dying, if he or she is realized at all, saying, finally, I'm being given another opportunity to liberate myself from this constant birth and death. So with our worldly views, we don't necessarily see the true meaning of things. We don't see the absolute truth in it. So we tend to be joyous in times when maybe it's not necessarily a joyful thing. We tend to be sad and adverse in things that we should be joyous for. So that's why we need to practice and practice to come to this realization, that, we want to liberate. That's our final goal, is to liberate.
Thank you. No, Tom made a good point, and I wonder, how many of you in your life at some point can remember when you first said, "Why was I born?" Maybe it was in a moment of frustration, or maybe it was a moment of happy exhilaration or something. But sometime, you said, "Oh my goodness, why was I born? This place is crazy." Anybody who's had that experience? Okay, everybody's had that experience. Gary, have you had that experience? No? Michael, we can't see Michael's hand, but
Probably, but I don't remember when the first time was. There have probably been several times when I've said that.
yeah. So it's a good question. And now we have an opportunity to really investigate that and to make a decision about how it is that we want to be born again. Are we conscious of prior lives? I don't think, I'm not. Maybe you guys, somebody is, but I'm not conscious of prior lives, and I don't expect to be conscious of a future life. So I don't know whether that flies in the faith of the, of what is said in the scriptures, that the Buddha sees all his past lives and knows his future life and all that. I look at it as the transpersonal. I look at it that I can relate to every single one of you. And I hope that every single one of you can relate to everybody else here. That we share many empathetic joys and sadnesses and so on. And through that, we are reborn. To say that I had a life in 1850 and, I was working in a textile mill up in Fall River, Massachusetts or something like that. I don't know that I can say that. I don't know that's, does it make a difference? I don't know if it makes a difference to me, but I can imagine being born in 1850, living in 1850, living in Fall River, Massachusetts, and working in a textile mill. I can imagine that. And because I can imagine it, it's like a dream. But what'd you do this afternoon? Is that like a dream to you now? So it's all this temporariness that we are going through, and being able to see that. So I see hands going up. So I don't know if you're, Georgie, did you want to say something?
Yeah, so it is in the concept of life after death is only in Buddhism, right? So other
No, it's in
traditions.
Hinduism. It's in Hinduism.
Okay.
It's a very Asian concept, actually, that goes
Okay.
through all of the different Asian philosophic traditions that I know about.
Okay. Yes. So this the belief in life after death is such a feel good kind of concept. So we have to say it is a belief, right? So scientifically, is there any kind of support for that? It's support that claim. It's not provable. It's a belief, but there were some anecdotal kind of stories of kids remembering the past life and so on. But how much in the West, people believe in in this concept, the life after death?
So let me ask you a question. What difference does it make? Would that,
Yeah, I
would
feel
not knowing, would not, if you don't have a future life, would it stop you from being a virtuous person now? Or would it give you permission to go and be a miscreant, to go and start doing terrible things because you don't have to worry about another life? Would that make a difference to you?
no, actually, the belief or knowing that there's life after death, that makes me feel really good, you know. So I feel I'm not going to end. I will be a continuous process. I will be keep on going, because death is a scary thing, and when you feel like, oh, once you're dead, then there's nothing, you know, you just return to dust and whatever. It's kind of the end. So instead, you know, I don't want to end. I just want to move on, keep on going. And so this day, life after death, is really very feel good, and something
Okay.
that you can you know, cherish in a way.
All right. Well, this leads us into another part of the conversation, and we're out of time tonight. But next week we're going to talk more about karma, cause, and result. You know, so what are you shaking your head no about, Tom? You want to keep on going? Somebody else had their hand up and wanted to say something, so I just want to give them an opportunity to do that.
Next week, we'll be practicing.
Oh, right. Next week we're not going to be available. That's right. Sorry. Next time we get together, so we'll have to explain that. But what Dorji was just saying is very pertinent to the conversation, and bears more time to be able to explore that. And that's what this discussion group is giving us time to do this. So we're going to have to postpone it, but please understand. Does anybody have anything you want to say quickly before we go? Because it's 9 o'clock and I want to respect everybody's time frame. Okay. So to make the point then, with Tom, we're going to be on retreat for the next couple of weeks. So the next time we get together, and I will certainly send out a reminder for everybody, the next time we get together is going to be March the 7th. So we got a couple of weeks off from Buddhism 101. And if anybody's interested in joining the retreat on Zoom, it is open and available to do that. You can download a book and so on, and there is a fee associated with everything. It is the retreat is being held by my longtime teacher, my guru, Drupal Tinley Ningpo, who has a center called Zhuang Nur Jiangzhu Bling down in Wesley Chapel, Florida, which is just outside of Tampa. And we're going down for a 10-day retreat. We'll be away for 2 weeks and to manage that. So if you want to join, the teachings are going to be on Guru Yoga and on the fivefold path of Mahamudra. And Mahamudra is the mind that leads to enlightenment. The mind that leads to enlightenment. So it's going to be fascinating. Drupal is going to be teaching, and the other teacher there is going to be Khenpo Yeshe Rinpoche, who is a well-known, well-respected Nyingma teacher. And Drupal is both Nyingma, but mostly he is Kagyu, Drikung Kagyu. So it's very, very good teachings that I suggest everybody come to. So I've already sent out announcements, I think. And if you want a special one directly to you, I can do that. So let me know. Any other comments or questions?
Thank you.
All right, then we have to do our dedication for tonight. So Louisa is our umze for this evening. So Louisa, would you go to our Buddhism 101 book and recite the dedication prayer on 21 and 22? That'll be our dedication for this evening.
Is it one of these books?
Yeah, this book. the 101 prayer book. Yes. Page 21. I invite everybody to recite along with Louisa, but with your microphones off, so we don't create a cacophony of sound.
Glorious, holy, venerable, precious, kind root and lineage lamas, divine assembly of Buddhas and assemblies of Buddhas. Oh, Buddhistas, yoginis, and decans dwelling in the 10 directions. Please hear my prayer. May the virtues collected in 3 times by myself and all sentient beings in samsara and nirvana and the innate root of virtue not result in the 8 worldly concerns, the 4 causes of samsara or rebirth, as a Shravaka or Pratya Buddha. May all mother sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me and mine, obstructors who harm, misleading Maras, and the hordes of demons, experience happiness, be separated from suffering, and swiftly attain unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious Buddhahood. By the power of the vast root of virtue, may I benefit all beings through my body, speech, and mind. May the afflictions of desire, hatred, ignorance, and arrogance, and jealousy not arise in my mind. May attachments to fame, reputation, wealth, and honor, and concern for this life not arise for even a moment. May my mind stream be moistened by loving kindness, compassion, and Buddhahita, and through that, may I become a spiritual master with good qualities equal to the infinity of space. May I gain the supreme attainment of Maharuddha in this life. May the torment of suffering not arise even at the time of death. May I not die with negative thoughts. May I not die confused by wrong view. May I not experience an untimely death. May I die joyfully and happily in the great luminosity of the mind as such, and the pervading clarity of Dharmata. May I, in any case, gain the supreme attainment of Maharuddha at the time of death or in the bardo.
Om, ah, hum. Om, ah, hum. Om, ah, hum. May my body, speech, and mind become inseparable with the body, speech, and mind of all the enlightened ones for the benefit of all sentient beings. Thank you all very much for being here and contributing to the conversation. And I think it's really great. I think this discussion group is really wonderful, and thank you all.
Thank you, Lance.
You're welcome.
Thank
Good
you,
night.
Lance.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Good night, Ed. I like to harass Ed. Good night.
Right. And we're
Thank
gonna-
you.
And
Good night,
next,
George.
Good
and
night.
next time we're going to talk about karma. We're going to talk about future lives.
Oh.
Great, great.
So thank you, everybody. Okay. Okay.
Great class tonight.
Yeah, you think so?
Yeah. Yeah.
All right.